Good afternoon, everybody. This is Father Walsh, and I'd like to say a few words about scripture readings for Sunday. Haven't done it for a while, so I'm sort of out of practice, but so we'll at least attempt to do so right now. And on Sunday, we're dealing with the whole question of wealth, and not so much whether wealth is good or bad. It's more a question of the indifference of wealthy people. In Jesus' time, their indifference towards those who are really struggling and were very poor and needy. And so Jesus deals with the subject by giving you a parable. A parable that's sort of the nice thing about a parable is that it makes truth concrete, so it's able to you're able to see for yourself what's going on. So in this instance, it's a very rich man and a very poor man. And the rich man is dressed in very fancy clothes, and he's sort of treated like a king almost. He's all these fancy clothes, and he eats the very best food, not just once a week, but every day. So he's sort of he's gorging himself on all kinds of nice things. Meanwhile, the beggar is outside his gate, lying there in sores, and he's sort of in his misery, and even dogs come and lick his sores. Meanwhile, the rich man, as I say, he's dining so very well, and in those days they didn't have knives and forks, so they sort of ate the food with their hands, and then they used bread in order to clean their hands, and when they were finished with the bread, they just threw it on the floors, and the dogs came along, and that's where they found their dinner and the breakfast for any particular day. Anyway, you know the story. That the rich man didn't show any concern whatsoever for the poor man, and that story seemed to have at least in the mind of Jesus, it went on for years, so much so that at the end of the day, both of them die, and the rich man finds himself safely. He finds himself in the bosom of Abraham, sort of a reversal of fortune, if you will, while at the same time the rich man finds himself in the netherworld where he's actually in torment, and from his abode in the netherworld, he's miserable, but he's able to see Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham, and he's so miserable that he sort of contacts Abraham and says to him, he says, send Lazarus, he says, to dip the tip of his finger in water and to sort of cool my lips for I'm in torment, and Abraham said to him, that doesn't work, because there's a great chasm between you and he, between you and me, so that he cannot go from his side to your side, and vice versa. So in other words, there's no. He had an opportunity during your lifetime, but that opportunity no longer exists. And then the rich man says, well, if he cannot help me in my misery, perhaps he could send him and tell him to warn my brothers that they also are living it up, and so that they don't end up in this place of misery. So if the poor man could Lazarus could inform them, then they might be saved. And Abraham says to him, he says, if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, then neither are they going to listen from somebody who has risen from the dead. So the bottom line in all of this is that it's the reversal, if you will. What we call the great reversal, that the poor man ends up in the bosom of Abraham, whereas the rich man ends up in misery. But the sad thing also is that the rich man, who had no name himself, but he realized that Lazarus had a name, that the poor man had a name. His name was Lazarus, but he didn't even feel he could address him by name. So he goes to Abraham and tells him to in a sense go to Lazarus. So he didn't even feel within himself he could sort of direct his attention to the poor man. So from all of that, I suppose what we're to gather is, first of all, the indifference of the rich man, of the rich towards the poor, and the fact that Lazarus at the gate is not just on that occasion. Lazarus is at so many gates, and all of us know that we're living in a world where poverty is endemic, where it's huge, where it's everywhere. And some countries, of course, are so much worse off than others. But sometimes for the wealthy, meaning that could mean any of us. So somehow our problem is, if we see a poor man or a poor woman, sometimes the temptation is. To, if they ask for anything, is to give them either money or something else. You give them something to get rid of them, whereas you're really not dealing with the reality of the person. And what's so important to realize is that each and every poor person, like each and every rich person, is ultimately a child of God, is somebody who is unique and is special and needs to be treated accordingly. So that would be at least one takeaway, at least for me, would be one takeaway out of this, even for myself, that if I deal with a person who is really struggling, who is poor, that first of all, I'll find out who they are and what their situation is, and that I treat them with the utmost respect. And whether or not you give them a handout or whatever, I think that is they're needed, obviously, but what's even more important is that you give them the respect which they so generously deserve, the same as anybody else. Thank you. Have a good weekend.